Hey guys, and welcome back. Now, because we love this person so much when we had her speak in an earlier episode, I decided to get her back on the show so we can ask her all the questions that we didn't get time to last time. So today we are going to be picking Kirsty Wirth's brain again. And in case you haven't listened to episode 8 of the Home Based Hope podcast with Kirsty, I highly, highly recommend that you do. It is a fantastic intro into gut health. And in case you need a little refresher, Kirsty is the founder of Kultured Wellness, a company whose mission is to inspire and educate people to take control of their health by eating real food and fermented foods that nourish the brain and the gut. She is the brainchild behind Kultured Wellness culture starters and functional supplements. And she is a fervent advocate for children on the spectrum. And she can totally relate to you because she too is a parent of a child on the spectrum. Her son was diagnosed at a young age and she very openly shares her journey. And I'm very grateful to have her on again so we can hear all her stories and what she's learned over the years, and we can soak up all her wisdom and insight. So welcome back, Kirsty.
Thank you. I'm so stoked to be back here again. It's get into the meaty, juicy stuff. It's great. Very nice to be here.
Yeah, awesome. It's a pleasure. Now, normally we start the episode with the journey and get a bit of background, but because we've already heard a bit about your journey back in episode 8, I'd love to kickstart today with an injection of hope because, as I said, you're a mum of a child on the spectrum, and lots of other parents will be able to relate to you and your story. And I think in many respects, you've crawled through the trenches and you've come out the other side. There are a lot of parents who are very thick in the trenches and they want to know that there are possibilities beyond what they currently think is possible.
Yeah.
So before we dive into the nuts and bolts of today's episode, I'd love it if you could just briefly tell us maybe what your son was like in the early stages of diagnosis and all the goals that he's kicking today.
So at 3.5, when he was diagnosed, he was non-verbal. So it didn't even have any functional words. So he was completely non-verbal. The complete lack of eye contact. He certainly had no sort of higher order thought or any processing skills. He barely slept, so it was just a screaming match at bedtime, and then all night long was just settling him. And then if he did settle, then we'd deal with night terrors, all of those kinds of things. He was really aggressive, so he would hit me and pull my hair out and, all of those things that go along with, that sort of inability to control himself and have any resilience around anything that wasn't going his way. And he behaved very much like a primitive animal. Like he just had, he just needed his needs met, and any other time but beyond that, he was just screaming. And so, I couldn't go out and socialise. I couldn't go to family events or bits and pieces like that. And it was really, really difficult. So, the prognosis for him was he would be non-verbal for the rest of his life. He certainly wouldn't be able to attend a mainstream school or meet those milestones that you want as a parent. So, we were pretty much told to set up and get ready for that. He'd head off and live in a home, and that would be Noah's life. So, and that's certainly not Noah's life now. He is over-verbal and he can't stop talking, and for all the parents out there, it's Sonic the Hedgehog and it's Teen Titans and all this kind of stuff. Like, he's very, very into his creative play and talking about it, and he attends mainstream school and he's age appropriate for his year level. He sleeps beautifully. His core and his motor control, his basic sort of functional movements are just fantastic. He's far more resilient. So if things are going down in the household, he will actually say to me, "Mum, it's go and sit down on the couch. I need to talk about this, and I can't control what's happening, and I need to talk about it. So he can self-soothe. And now, this is, of course, not all the time. Like, he is 10, so, stuff goes down, but he's got the capacity to do those things, and he has got all these new resources to be able to sort of manage. So, yeah, we travel with him, and he's such a joy to be around. He's got an awesome sense of humour. He's completely out there and quirky, and I love him for that. But yeah, life is so much easier now. I mean, we didn't have a life before, and now we're just coming out into this awesome sort of, I have a husband and another child, and I have friends, and I actually have a life, and all of those sorts of things. And I can, with confidence, go somewhere and not like, is this going to all turn pear-shaped? How's this going to roll? So it's just phenomenal. And he improves every day. We've got a lot to work on, and he just continues to improve. So it's just so beautiful to watch him come out and meet him for the first time, really.
That it's just such a remarkable story, and I think it is so powerful because so many parents are just clinging on to that hope. And a lot of the times, like yourself, at the diagnosis stage, not a lot of hope is given.
No, I mean, I think we talked about this in the last episode. We were told, this is what's going to go down, and I'd really recommend that you and your husband go and get some marriage counselling, because 80% of marriages break down. So we were told that. It's like, great, so my son's not going to really function, and neither's my marriage. It was just, that was what we got told in that day. It was like, holy smokes, wow, where do you go from here? What do you do?
Yeah, it's a hopeless picture that's being painted. And for a lot of parents, this is their reality. People buy into that. So it's so great that you've sort of, blazed your own trail and, come out the other side, and you're sharing this with the community. It's fantastic, and we love you for it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And do you attribute a lot of your son's growth and healing and this journey to his gut health and the healing of his gut? And we spoke a lot about it in episode 8, but I'd like to look at it from a different point of view today, and looking at other things other than food that can impact the state of the gut.
Yeah.
Obviously, you went through healing on a lot of different levels.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things is nature. And I know you are a big nature lover. You're always out in nature.
Yeah.
Can you talk about, for the parents that are like, how does getting outside in nature affect my child's digestive system?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really funny. I had a consult with a client 2 days ago, and the child was going off, like absolutely cutting sick. And my response was, get in the car and go down to either the beach or the national park. And I remember my client being so angry with me. It's like, really? That's your expert advice, is getting outside? And, I pay good money for you, and this is the advice that I get. And every time that will always be my advice, because, nature, physiologically, what it does to the body, we're only just finding out. I mean, it's just phenomenal, and we know it, we feel it innately. You can't deny, when you sit on the beach and you watch those waves roll in, you cannot deny what it does to you. And it's not just for adults, it's for the kids as well. So, on a basic functional level, as soon as we get out into nature, our heart rate drops, our stress levels drop. We dive into this whole different response of going from like complete fight or flight, stressed out to the max, to this calm rest and digest. And so that rest and digest is really important. So if you are constantly trying to eat, or you're trying to function in that fight or flight state, you cannot digest your food, you can't assimilate your nutrients, and you basically just can't function. So if you get out into nature and you bring all of that down, the next meal you have such a greater chance of actually being able to digest and absorb that nutrients. So the effects of this, just the basic stress response in our body, is absolutely massive. Now, I know for a lot of families that the thought of going out into nature is absolutely scary, because it's like, they're not caged. What if they run off? You know, what if they completely lose it? People will look at me if they're like galloping around and they're screaming and they're hitting me. And you just have to choose the right nature for you. So I can't stress that enough. Do not try and take your child to a busy playground that doesn't have, a fence around it or something, because you'll just spend your whole time trying to manage that. Whereas if you go to a safe nature space where, you're out in a big national park, they're going to be really safe. No one's going to be watching you. They can run off and gallop around and scream and flap and do everything they need to do, and no one's going to be there to judge you. But that's really daunting for a parent, to take their child to a national park, into space, and just watch them and wait for them to, what are they going to do now? And follow them and let them be in charge of their experience. And if you're not a nature person and you're not comfortable out there, it's really freaky and really scary. But there's nothing better than getting out. You've got a trail in front of you, no one's about, and you just know they just take off and do whatever they want and climb trees, and your only job is to follow them and let them drive the experience. So when I say nature, I don't mean, go to the playground or go down to the beach where there's 50 other families and everyone's going to be watching you while your child's, going off. But like, choose the right nature spot. The other thing about nature is sunshine generally comes from being out in nature. And I know that even, like, we live in sunny spots, but I know that even in, down south, there is still sun, even in wintertime. Sun provides us with energy. We have a lot of studies around the amount of energy within our cells, how it activates this thing called the mitochondria, and how it supports our body. When we get that direct sunlight, it impacts our circadian rhythm. So that's our body telling us to when to wake up and when to go to sleep. And kids on the spectrum have no concept of when to wake up and go to sleep, because they're in front of screens all the time. So we need to reteach their bodies those things. So being up in the morning and outside in the sunshine. And obviously we absorb vitamin D when we get out into the sunshine, and that vitamin D is massive for immune response, for your hormones, for brain energy, for every single component of our body. It's remarkable how many functions in our body rely on vitamin D. So, and the final thing about getting out into nature is these beautiful little microbes that live in there. And, dirt is, so we're made up of bacteria, which we talked about in that last episode. Like 80-90% of our body is bacteria, and it's like a bucket with a tap on the bottom. It does drain out, and so if you're not topping up the bucket up the top, you have an empty bucket of good bacteria. And going out in nature, you're topping up that bucket of beautiful, beneficial, ancestral bacteria. Now, that's rolling around in the dirt. That's, putting your hands in the dirt. It's going, getting out in the garden. It's walking barefoot. It's even, we know now through studies that even walking in a national park or a forest, we actually inhale the bacteria and it comes into our body. And there's I shared it on, the Kultured Wellness Facebook page like a year ago or something. There's this amazing graphic of someone walking through nature and all the bacteria names that come into the body that's floating around in that space. It's so cool. And so you're constantly topping up, as opposed to if you're inside and you're stressed, you're constantly draining. And then there's obviously that concept that some people are familiar with, which is that grounding or earthing. And that's that really incredible connection to nature. So once again, it brings us down, makes us feel balanced, grounded, stops that stress response, calms the nervous system, and you can get into your child's sort of mind and start communicating with them. So every time, without doubt, if like stuff's going down at home, you literally have to wrangle them into the car and get out into your safe nature spot. So for me, when things were really bad, I just had one spot that I knew really well, that I could go to, and I kind of knew where all the trails were and what was going on, and I had, you know, baby on the front pack with me, and off we went. And then, you know, obviously it's expanded and we go rock climbing and paddleboarding and all sorts of stuff now with Noah. But yeah, it's there should be no barriers. If you're creating barriers to get out into nature, they're your barriers, not your child's. And so why am I nervous? Do I need a backup with me? Do I need my, you know, my partner or a support person to help me go out there and give it a try? So they're different kids, absolutely different kids. It's like two personalities.
Well, there's a study done on kids with ADHD where they did a 20-minute walk around the block in nature, or out in nature, 20-minute walk in nature, and how much that calmed down the levels of hyperactivity, inattention, and they're ready to come back, ready to focus. And I think we really need to start looking at the healing benefits of nature. We are so stuck inside, glued to the iPad, whatever gaming devices, and it can be a struggle. So even getting out into the backyard, I mean, if we can tick that sunshine box, if we can tick the putting the feet on the earth, you know, I think can be just like an initial great step for parents to turn off the TV and get outside for 10 minutes, wherever it is. Yeah.
And it should be in your weekly thing. So, you know, if in your weekly you've got, oh goodness, I don't know, acrobatics on Monday night, and then you've got, you know, piano lessons on Wednesday, or whatever the flow is for a family, you know, nature time should be locked in there as the most important thing, just as much as all the other after school activities. And on the weekend, your whole weekend should revolve around nature time. Now, I know that sounds really extreme, but this is what gets these kids back to where they want to be and back into balance again. And so you just have to go there, and then you'll start to enjoy it and see the benefits too. And you're a better mum, you're a better parent. You can calm yourself down to be more resilient, to manage what's going on in your life. And this is amazing. You know, you come out of those situations like, I got this. I got this for today. I can manage this today. And then I'll wake up tomorrow and I'll plug and recharge back into nature again. And then I got it for another day. So.
For the parents who are health conscious and who are worried about the sunscreens and different things like that, you're saying get out into the sunshine. What do you recommend, or what do you use with Noah?
Okay, so that's a really tricky one. Some kids won't even put sunscreen on, and so that's tricky in itself. I'm not a huge fan of sunscreen because of all the chemicals in there. We have found one which is a surf mud, which is incredible. There's no chemicals on it. And so, you know, it's literally like a mud that goes on your face. So you get it in once in the morning and it stays on all day and you're fine. I do sort of have that sort of rule of being out there for 20 minutes and not really needing any sunscreen. And then after that, do we put a hat on? Do we put a rashie on? You know, do we cover up a little bit? As your vitamin D levels increase and the beneficial fats in your body increase, your body is far more resilient to the sun and you don't burn as easily. So you can be out for a little bit longer without obviously burning or, you know, damaging your skin. But yeah, at the moment it's exciting. There are sunscreens out there that aren't full of horrible chemicals that will send your child into a spin. But I would go for little snippets without anything. So it's really hitting the skin and it's providing that amazing amount of vitamin D. And awesome. Especially on the eyes. It's very important for your eyes to be out into the sun unprotected with sunglasses and those sorts of things. Now, obviously, in the height of summer and it's really, really bright, you don't do it all the time, but just give your eyes a chance to really connect in and have that exposure.
What does that do for the eyes?
Yes, it's very important once again for those circadian rhythms and for that mitochondrial support. So it's it has a huge benefit to the brain.
Okay, awesome. All right, good tip. All right, let's move on to movement, because movement is another thing that can impact the state of our gut. And again, parents might be thinking, how does movement impact the digestive system? Can you talk us through, the connection there?
Yeah. So once again, movement reduces our stress levels. And so, going out and exercise. Now, obviously, if you trash yourself, you will be stressed out. But if you're doing beautiful, walking or a nice bike ride around the block or hanging out at the park, your stress levels are going to come down. So obviously then you're going to get into that rest and digest mode. Movement, often we do a lot of twists and a lot of incidental movement you don't even know that we're doing, but that helps with that peristaltic action for the gut to start moving fecal matter through and for us to actually, excrete that fecal matter. And lots and lots of kids either swing between that chronic constipation or their extreme diarrhea. And so it supports that peristaltic action, and it also helps to create the right acids. So when we move, we create lactic acid in our body. Now, of course, lactic acid, too much of it is the whole, your muscles are killing. You can't, you wake up the next morning and you're all tight and sore, which is how I feel today. But your body's sore, and that lactic acid is doing its job. It's there to really protect the body and provide that sort of a bit of an inflammatory response to protect it. Now, the lactic acid is really important in our gut because it provides the perfect pH in our gut to grow beautiful, beneficial microbes. And so by exercising, little do we know that we are creating the right state of play and environment in our gut microbiome to really get beneficial bacteria in there. So, and obviously with movement as well, we're supporting our organs, which is very important. We're getting, switching on that core and enabling us to, I could go on about handwriting and all sorts, but it's very important. But I think if I can digress a little bit to the brain as well, because our gut and our brain are so intricately linked, and we know about 2% of what we're going to find out in the next 5 years, 10 years. It's just so exciting. And when we move, and especially when we do specific movements, we're firing up different parts of our brain. And again, you would know all about this far more than me, but it's talking to our brain to say, come on, wake up. I'm stimulating over this on my right side of my body. So in my, my left side of my brain, it's like, oh, the language is firing up and this is firing up and executive functions happening and, my socialization and all those things can be stimulated in the brain from simple monkey bars or simple crawling around playing games, pretending to be tigers or elephants or whatever. So when you talk about movement, you have to be as a parent with child with needs, you've got to be a little bit more specific. So that's why we love going rock climbing with Noah so much, because it's lots of cross crawl and lots of things that are going to spark up the body from head to toe. But you don't have to rely on your OTs, and you don't have to go to these sessions all the time and pay an exorbitant amount of money with your NDIS funding. You just go out there and do it. And from my experience, the parents need to do it just as much as the adults. So when my whole process of supporting Noah, I found out my brain function and my gut function and everything needed so much attention. And so I needed to do all of that just as much. So, the movement sparks responses in the gut that support the brain. It sparks, that lactic acid. It, obviously supports that rest and digest. And there's just so many facets, but it's got to be constant, and it's got to be diverse, the kind of movement. And you have to model the movement. And you have to be out there doing it, and your kids see that it's your priority, and you wake up in the morning and let's move. And even this morning with Noah, he wanted to get a printout because he loves his printouts to create all these characters. And I'm like, well, dude, you've got to go and skateboard around the block, 3 times, then you can go and get your printout. And it's just a non-negotiable, and it's that sort of cause and effect, and he's used to it now. It took ages to get there, but he knows if you want that kind of thing, you've got to move first.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm glad you did segue into the brain, because that is exactly where I was headed as well. Mm-hmm. Because we're learning so much about neuroplasticity, and reorganizing the brain and how the brain can rewire itself. And it's continuously doing this. And this is, as we grow up, as kids, as babies, movement is our first thing that starts to organize the brain. So, I did see on your Instagram and social media ages ago that you went to America, and you went to the Cerebrum Health Center in Dallas. I would love to know a little bit more about this, because I'm sure our listeners would love to know what you learnt as well over there.
Oh, we got 10 weeks. It was amazing. So we were there for 2 weeks. And we fortunately it's like the premier place in the world to go to address specific needs with regards to the brain, autoimmunity. They're not super focused on gut. So that was great that we'd really supported that moving into it. And so first of all, we learned a lot about our autoimmune condition and what parts of the brain had our autoimmune condition affected. So what this means is that we had specific infections and, infections is the right word. So specific infections from our gut that had the amount of toxicity had actually broken down the barrier that protects our brain. It had eaten holes all the way through and got into our brain and basically stopped major parts of our brain working. Now, I say ours because mine results were actually worse than Noah's. So this is incredible when the specialist said to me, on paper, with your results, you should be highly medicated and in an institution. They were like, we've never seen results like this before. They thought, like, are you a really good actress? Are you lying? Like, how are you functioning? But they did a whole heap of other tests because they were like, this is not possible to have these results in your brain, but to be functioning. And I was like, it's your environment, it's your diet, it's nature, it's your, how you perceive the world. It's all of those things I'd been able to work on to at least manage the situation, and obviously for Noah as well. So we found out the damage that had happened in our brains from these horrible infections that had got in there. And then what we did was we then worked on stimulating those parts of the brain with this neuroplasticity, which basically means, like, time to wake up, you've been asleep for long enough, let's fire up, and getting all those connections working again. So Noah did all these incredible different movements to stimulate the brain. They had even these electro sort of things that would, if you stimulate the cheek, has a lot to do with different parts of your brain and your language, and you guys would talk about this in the podcast, but each part of the brain and what it does. And so the most fascinating thing was that the vestibular system, which is a really exciting obviously part of the brain, this vestibular system for us is really poor, very out of whack because it was affected by these infections. So they sat Noah in this gyro machine, which is basically like a big upside down crazy roller coaster, sat him in there, strapped him in, and literally flipped him like he was an astronaut, spun him round, flipped him forward, and to activate the vestibular and the different parts of the brain. And now while he was doing that and being flipped, he had to say the alphabet. He had to say the alphabet backwards. I can't even say the alphabet backwards, like at the best of times, let alone when I'm being spun around and flipped around. And then we'd have, cross crawl sort of stuff, like so hands and knees. And so every part of the brain was being stimulated whilst you were being flipped upside down and changed and moved around. And and then obviously lots of balancing on one leg and catching balls with different arms and with different hands. But it was just fascinating to go through the process of that really incredible testing to break down what's the infection, what part of the brain is impacted, and let's just rebuild it. Let's just go in there and stimulate it and let the body and the brain find that equilibrium again, because it was just so out of whack. And so we work on it all the time. We didn't go there for 2 weeks and then suddenly it's all better. But the lessons that we learned were just so fantastic. But I didn't go in the gyro spin. This is too scary for me.
And I think that's so great that, part of the take-home message there too is that it's about getting that knowledge and getting that inspiration, knowing what direction you're headed in, and then taking it home. And that's what, home base is all about, home base hope. It's about empowering parents with the strategies to do stuff at home. And like you said, with the movement and OT, you don't need to spend heaps of money. You just need to know what you should be doing and get on the right track. And you have so many resources in nature at home that you can be accessing that doesn't have to cost you an arm and a leg. Yeah.
And one of the biggest reasons why we went was I could share it and, hey, we learned this here, but now when we go home, this is all we're doing. And it's all stuff you can do at home. Money should never be a restriction for those things, because it's just what you do in nature. So, and
are you swinging Noah off the chandeliers? And what's replacing the gyro?
Yeah, getting dumped in the ocean.
Yeah.
So we literally go out in the ocean and he goes in like the break and gets dumped. And when you get dumped, what happens? You spin around. And when you go out rock climbing, you can flip upside down in your harness. When you do a handstand, you're flipping upside down. When you're in the swimming pool, you go backwards and forwards. And all these things you do in a day.
But is he saying the alphabet?
Yeah, good point. No, definitely not. Definitely not. But even things like when you come home from your OT session and they're telling you, okay, they need to jump on their left leg because, we want to stimulate right side of the brain. Just, write that down and then just make it part of the fun and just add it into your day. If you do 10 left leg jumps, then we can go and do this and make a chart and just make it really fun, and then do it for yourself, because you'll be so shocked at what happens as an adult to your brain.
Yeah, awesome. Alrighty, I wanted to touch on anxiety as well, because I'm seeing a lot of kids with a lot of anxious and worried feelings.
Yeah.
And I suppose I do what I can from like a behavioural, sensory, cognitive point of view. But I also am referring a lot of people to you and to check out your website and do some research into gut health. So can you, again, make this connection, anxiety and the gut? How does it relate?
Yeah, there is a huge link in the science, in what we see, every aspect of investigation. So it's not just this, so-and-so had anxiety and this is what happened. It's so well documented now that there is a direct correlation between anxiety and the state of your gut. There's also a really direct correlation between anxiety and parasitic activity. So, and all kids have worms and parasites. It's not just designed for our really beautiful, unique kids that we work with. All kids have it. Now, so in that chronic situation where they get a worm or a parasite, that ammonia toxicity that the parasite and the worm releases, it's a byproduct when it's living within us. It gets excreted through our kidneys. So ammonia goes out through those kidneys, and it requires heaps of B6 as one of the nutrients. This is a very reductionist approach, but one nutrient. Now, we know that B6 is a major nutrient in supporting mental health and specifically anxiety. So if you are seeing an enormous surge of anxiety, alarm bells should be absolutely pinging in your head. Quick, let's get a parasite test. Let's look at worms. What's going on? Is it a full moon? That's when they all love to come out and play. Are you seeing some cyclical changes here between my kid is actually fine for 3 weeks of the month and then they're psycho for a week, and I can't, they're anxious, I can't control them, they're not resilient, they don't sleep, they wake up tired, they've got big bags under their eyes. There's some real telltale signs when you know what to look for. So I would definitely look to that. The other thing that we see, and we're actually part of a research study at the moment with Victoria Uni with one of the PhD students, is that we have this incredible bacteria in our gut, which is a beneficial bacteria that helps us to synthesize all of our amino acids that make all our happy brain chemicals. So this specific E. coli produces tryptophan, tyrosine, all of these amino acids that then help us with serotonin and dopamine and all these awesome brain chemicals that make us want to just get up and rock our day and get on with life. Now, if you don't have that bacteria in your gut, you're not going to be able to make those amino acids. You're not going to have any of those happy brain chemicals. And so you are going to feel very, very unbalanced and so out of balance. So if I would be investigating, number one, for all of those parasitic behavior and worms, and then I would be going even further, and does my child actually have these bacteria strains, and is actually that's what's causing the anxiety? Because like for you, there's only so much you can do with that supportive care, and if it's still happening, we've got to go deeper. And then when you find that at that deeper root cause level, when you start to work on that, then all the strategies that like you would implement with your family, suddenly they work, and you don't need to see them every week. They actually stick, and the child has new level of resilience and tools in their toolkit to cope with what's going on for them. Otherwise, it doesn't stick, and it just every week we're dealing with the same thing. So it's just investigating all the time.
Absolutely. You took the words right out of my mouth. I definitely agree. We need to look at the root cause, need to look what's underlying it. And then obviously all the behavioral and sensory things, they help form the habits and, the mental state, which is really important too. What I was going to ask you is, just back on the testing again, I think you did mention it in the last episode, but if you could just remind everyone how they would go about getting a test.
Yeah. So, so there is a couple of ways to do it. So a basic, stool sample through the doctor, which is Medicare approved, will tell you if there's any lurking parasites in there. There are specific blood tests that you can get that will have markers to tell if there's any worms activity going on there. We don't really have any great tests for looking at worms, so we look into bloods. And then if you want to go and investigate deeper, we use Bioscreen Labs, which is a specific lab in Melbourne that really goes in there and finds that E. coli strain that I was talking about that helps you look for those happy brain chemicals. They also look for parasites. They look for infections in the gut. And really, for me personally, when we had our first Bioscreen test, it was a game changer. It was absolutely life-changing for us. It was the best money that we ever spent on investigating, because it was like, oh my God, that dude in there. We're like, what is it doing to our body and our brain? Otherwise, we were just guessing the whole time. So, I would highly, highly recommend that you do it. And one day, hopefully, it will be Medicare approved. I'll keep working on it.
Yeah.
I'll keep working on it.
Fantastic.
But just back to the OT stuff again and getting that root cause. For Noah, he wouldn't even walk on sand. We would try and put him off to the beach. Now, this is two adults that the beach is everything to us, and our child wouldn't walk on sand or go to the beach. Can you imagine? I was like, no, this can't be. This isn't going to happen. He wouldn't walk on the sand. He wouldn't wear things with the tags, and he was such a sensory kid, and I'd only eat the crunchy things and all that kind of stuff. And there was nothing we could do therapy-wise. It was just there. It kept happening. the minute we started dealing with the gut problems, it literally just went away. And I know that sounds really simplistic, but it actually did. And so then it was working with our professional support crew to then just change that learned behavior. Because, you know, he had this sort of, I don't put my feet on the sand behavior. It's like, well, actually you do now. So let's go back and relearn this new behavior and have all the techniques and supports around that to help him through that. But I don't think he ever would have changed his sensory experiences if we hadn't have fixed his gut and got his nutrients right and got rid of the worms and stuff. So these things do just go away. They're not like, oh, my kid's got sensory issues and we just have to live with it.
Such an important message, and such a big, you know, parents will be listening to this going, what? Really? How come I don't know about this? How come, you know, the message isn't out there that this can be such an effective solution to such a debilitating, you know, like for some kids, it can take over their life. And families, it can be, the whole family is stressed and, you know, it can be really unpleasant. So this is one strategy, you know, that they can start today, start looking into it. And so if we look at that anxiety, if we go back to that anxiety gut relationship. So if parents start, do the test and then they start looking at probiotics, this then is going to help that anxiety, isn't it?
Yes. So ideally you get in there and you get the right testing and the really specific information, and then you work at changing that balance. It's really important to work with someone that, you know, really understands that balance, because some kids can't just take any form of probiotics. Some probiotics will actually exacerbate their condition and make it worse. So lots of your crew out there listening are probably like, well, I tried probiotics and my kid actually was worse. And so it didn't work for us. And that I've seen that happen a lot. And so families are very nervous of gut health and think that it hasn't worked for them. And that's just because all the ducks weren't lined up and it wasn't the right order for your child's specific needs. So you can't, with a kid on the spectrum, just go and grab a probiotic off the shelf and give it to them and assume that it's going to work. You've got to be far more specific with that. So obviously that's how our cultures were designed, was, you know, it was like, well, okay, let's research which strains, what's going to help, how's it going to support that sort of chronic condition. But very important to make sure that you're really understanding what's going on in there and rebuilding it with the specifics. So so could parents purchase, so if they're looking into the gut health and you've got the kefir, you've got the yogurt and you've got that apple juice, the starters for them, can they just purchase them, or do they need to have the tests done? No, so they can purchase the cultures and they can get started on that, and that's fine because of the specific strains in them. They will be fine to start with those. Now with the anxiety, that specific E. coli strain that we were talking about, which is very directly linked in the research and the literature, that requires an extra probiotic called Mutaflor. And so we sell that at Kultured Wellness, and that's then going to really ramp up that coping mechanism and support that anxiety. So you start with the fermented foods on that baseline level, and then you slowly work up as you investigate more and as you sort of get into the swing of things, because it's a big world out there, you know, bone broth and fermented foods and what the hell am I doing? So you just start at the pace that you can.
And how much would you recommend? So for a child who's just starting out on, say, your yoga or the kefir, how much should they start?
Yeah, it's really very medicinal. And kids that are really out of balance, I would be starting with like a teaspoon a day, and just let them get used to it and let their bodies get used to it. And then in an ideal world, you'd work up to a cup a day for the yogurt and 2 or 3 cups for the kefir. But they won't like it. So you've got to hide it in foods, and you've got to expect that they won't like it, because there's a bit of a war going on in their bodies. They've got these, bad bacteria that are calling the shots. They want sugar, they want carbohydrates, and they want that environment to stay like that so they can survive. They're very opportunistic. Whereas your beneficial bacteria, they want beautiful vegetables and fiber and coconut yogurt and stuff like that. So until the balance changes, there will be a big tussle going on, and that tussle will be fussy eating, rejecting it, all that kind of stuff. So what is it, 50 times you have to offer a food before you actually go for it?
Yeah. Even more for some kids, honestly. And that's what it is. I think it is just about being consistent, and hiding it in the food is a great idea.
Yeah. So you get their normal yogurt, and you literally get a teaspoon of the Kultured Wellness yogurt, and you put it in and stir it. They have no idea because the flavors all change, but they're still getting that beautiful beneficial bacteria.
Mm-hmm.
But just to give families hope, so Noah would literally have rice cakes and Vegemite. I actually don't remember him eating anything. I'm sure he did, but that's in my mind all those years ago. That's what I remember, and that's all he ate. Whereas now he has liver pate and stews and vegetables, and at lunch he'll have like steamed broccoli and sauerkrauts in his lunchbox that he chooses to eat himself. And he has a huge array of foods and textures and everything. So from a boy that literally was, crunch and white to that, it's just phenomenal. But once you change the balance of those bugs, they really do come over and eat a variety of foods. It's incredible.
How long did that process take?
Okay.
How long are we talking?
Yeah, so the families that I work with now, it takes between 3 to 5 days for that initial, like, I'm going to eat your leg off kind of stuff if you don't feed me that. And that real kind of give me the sugar, give me the food. So it's about 3 to 5 days, and you're really strong. You don't give in and go, well, actually maybe just have that and then we'll get back to it. You have to stick with it. And then, anywhere between a couple of weeks to sort of 3 to 6 months, they have a full variety of food. So it really doesn't take long, but it's consistency.
I think the biggest barrier for some parents is that they don't want to starve their kids. So if they're not giving, all those sugary treats that they used to, their kid just will refuse to eat.
Good. Let them refuse to eat. They'll be hungry in the end, and then they'll eventually want to eat. So I've had clients that when we've swapped them over to a nourishing whole food diet, some of them haven't eaten for 2 days. And obviously if your child doesn't have a lot of resources on their body, that's different. But most of these the children are, they've got a bit of resources there. We can play around with it. And it's this amazing battle of wills between mum and child and the bugs. Mm-hmm. And every time the children eventually I'm hungry, and they will go back and they will eat the food, but you have to stick with it. And if you're nervous about that, work with someone that can support you with that, because it's life-changing after they change their diet.
Is there a point that they should get concerned, like when their child,
Yeah, definitely.
When they're not eating?
Yeah, definitely. But we've not really ever encountered, we've encountered that with 1 or 2 children. And, but yeah, not really. The children generally end up, wanting the food. Yeah. Yeah.
All righty, cool. Well, I think we might start to wrap it up. I've still got heaps more questions. We'll just have to have you on again.
Because I keep talking so much.
No, it's great. It's great. It's fantastic. We might still end with the 5 rapid fire questions because you probably have.
Okay. What does that mean?
Different responses. So we asked them last time. So they're the same questions, and they're the ones we finish with every episode. And you might just come up with different things than your answers last time. So
yeah, beautiful.
Number 1, what is one habit that our listeners can implement today?
Get out into nature and sunshine.
Awesome. Number 2, what do people never ask you that you wish they did? Is there anything, or do they ask you everything?
I wish they asked me more about themselves. So, how could I work on myself to be able to be the best mum I can, or dad I can be, to support my children? How do I do me first? And that's all facets. You know,
putting the oxygen mask on yourself.
Yeah, and actually asking how to do that, and knowing that your children have imbalances in their bodies, which generally means the mums and the dads do too. So how do I actually do that for me and do it well so I can be the best support crew I can be for my child? So I wish mums would ask that more rather than, I've got to fix my child. I've got to fix my child.
Which is so often, obviously, the priority. But we've got to look at ourselves too.
Yeah, because if we're not resilient and strong and have all the resources and the knowledge, that we just can't be the best person for our children. Great.
Number 3, what book would you recommend that all parents read?
Oh, wow. So either of Dr. Perlmutter's books would be amazing. So his latest one, the gut. Oh, can you remind me what it's called?
No.
So his first one is grain brain, and the second one is gut brain or something like that. So it's amazing. There is actually a chapter in there on, kids with developmental needs, kids on the spectrum and all that sort of stuff, and how that interlinked gut-brain connection. He unpacks it beautifully. There's a nice mixture of science as opposed to discussion. So, yeah.
It's the one with the broccoli on the front. Is that it? Yeah. The brain. Brain and something else. Yeah.
Just read both. So you'll be fine.
What is one of your top unfinished bucket list items?
Oh, goodness me. Professionally or personally? Wow. Big question. So my unfinished stuff will be writing my book. So I'm on to it and I'll get there in the end. But I would really like to finish writing so I can just share more. So
awesome. Looking forward to that. Is there any timeline on that, or?
Yeah, probably in the next 6 months to a year. I'm going to call it the Gutville. So who lives in Gutville and how do they all behave and what kind of personalities and how do they interact? And we're working on a children's book at the moment as well. So
excellent.
So
fantastic. Yay. Okay, great. And last question, if you could only offer one piece of advice to parents, what would it be?
Stop, sit and look and listen to your child. So instead of thinking you know what's right for them or thinking that the professionals around you know what's right for them, really sit down and look and listen and be there for them. So step aside from being the warrior mum for a minute and just engage and sit and be mum. It's very powerful.
Yeah, and it's all that connection. It all comes back to connection, doesn't it?
Every time. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, speaking of connection, how can our listeners connect with you?
What a segue. Brilliant. So Kultured Wellness with a K. So kulturedwellness.com is our website. We have a community group, which is a closed community group on Facebook, which is, I do a lot of sort of impromptu sort of little discussions and workshops in there and lots of information. The Kultured Wellness health coaches support that group. So you can actually ask questions in there and respond. Obviously not super technical questions about some of the stuff that we've worked on today. And then our main Facebook page. And then if you want to sort of follow me more personally on the stuff I get up to more on a daily basis and those sorts of things, then Instagram's the place to go, and it's all Kultured Wellness. So
awesome. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's just amazing. Like, I have to go back and listen to the podcast again like that to really soak it all up. But you're amazing. Like, even just looking at you, like, your glow, you're definitely obviously walk the talk. So it's always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. And thank you to you for being able to provide this vehicle and all this support for everyone out there. I didn't have any of this, when I was back in the trenches. So I'm just so stoked that there is support out there now. So please keep going.
Yes, I will. We're charging through, not stopping.
Awesome.
Cheers. Thank you, Kirsty.
See
Bye.
Ya.